What's the most disturbing thing you've witnessed in real life? Story 1. Worked with a young guy who was in recovery from heroin abuse. One day he relapsed and still came to work. He was in no shape to work, but I didn't want to send him out on his own for the day. I also didn't want to report it because it would possibly send him back to jail or get him removed from his halfway house. I told him to lay down on a couch in the office until he came down. I gave him some bottles of water and left food on the table. I checked on him about 30 minutes later and he was face down with a pool of blood under his jaw. He was alive, but he had chewed a hole in his tongue and lip. Called an ambulance. They said he was lucky he fell off the couch, or he would have probably choked on his own blood. He recovered after a few weeks, but lost a chunk of his tongue in the process. He improved over the next year and remained sober. He started dating a girl and they got married after a few months. I got a phone call about a year later informing me that he had relapsed again and died of an overdose. He found out his wife was pregnant and couldn't deal with it. He was a good kid, but if he wasn't constantly monitored, he would make some pretty poor decision. Edit. Some have asked here, and some have DM'd. I don't know what substance he was on that day. I assumed some sort of opioids based on his history, but it could have been anything. The event was 7 years ago. I am not in contact with anyone involved anymore, as I've changed jobs and moved states since then. As some have mentioned, he may not have directly chewed his tongue. After thinking about it, he most likely fell off the couch while sleeping, or trying to get a drink, and landed with his face on the tile floor. I'd guess he bit through his tongue and lip, then, rather than chewing at it. I don't know. I wasn't in the room, I just found him. I was informed later on that his wife miscarried and moved home with her mom. It was a restaurant that was primarily a catering company for offices, hospitals, airlines, and the university. It was run by several recovering addicts who spent their whole existence trying to get people through their rehabilitation. We were very tolerant and protective of employees during relapses. Story 2. Wasn't my best friend, but I walked her dog 5 days a week for over a year, got to know her pretty well. Opened the door, and bam, just a few feet away there she is, hanging, dead a few days. Scared the fuck out of me. I got her dog and went and told the front desk. Front desk guy immediately broke down because we both knew she struggled with it. She tried to even give me her dog in the past before another attempt because we were close like that. Fucked up thing is, I'm pretty sure she used a slip lead. It's a type of leash I'd use on the job. I was in shock for days. The image didn't leave my vision. Met her whole family after it too, so tragic man. Story 3. My mother dropped dead of a massive heart attack in front of my 10-year-old son. He yelled for me to come, and I found her face first on the floor. I sent my son to his bedroom and called 911. They instructed me to flip her over and perform CPR. Blood gurgled from her mouth, and her nose was bent to the side. She didn't even have time to put her arms out to catch herself. I'm so sorry I couldn't save her. Story 4. Seeing my dad on his deathbed on Thanksgiving morning and sitting with him while he passed. I was 16 and remember thinking it didn't look like him cause of all the tubes and meds he had in his system. Was freaky seeing him like that at first. Story 5. I was with my dad when he died. It was liver cancer. Took a few years to kill him, but when he was sent home on hospice, it only took 2 weeks. Afterward, I talked to a friend that said I was lucky to have been able to say goodbye because his dad died in a car accident. I told him he was lucky he didn't have to watch his dad wither away and die slowly. I guess there's a good part to everything if you look at it from the right perspective. Story 6. So, true same thing with my dad. The worst part was watching him deteriorate. Growing up, he was the fix-it dad. Literally anything needed fixing or building, he could do it. He a garage full of tools. One time I begged him to buy me a whiteboard, and later that day he came in with one he built with varnished wood and everything. But when he got sick, he slowly got weaker, had edema in his leg that eventually made him wheelchair-bound because of how swollen his leg got. He couldn't do all those things, and it breaks me to think that's how he spent the last year of his life. One night he cried and told me he was just tired. Honestly, as he lay in that hospice bed, I felt so bad that I remember trying to telepathically tell him it was okay for him to go. Story 7. When I was in my early 20s, I worked at a warehouse on the dock. One day, a truck driver called to me from one of the bay doors. He had left his keys and newspaper on the dock. I went to retrieve the items and turned around to face him and realized that a trailer was backing into the same bay door, pinning this man between the dock and the trailer. Me and the guys got the trailer to back off, and the man collapsed on the ground. I found out the next day he succumbed to his injuries. I blamed myself for years and nearly drank myself to death. Story 8. Part of my job as a NICU nurse is caring for babies who are withdrawing from opiates. The level of suffering they go through is utterly gut-wrenching. They have this constant, high-pitched cry that is honestly more of a shriek. Their little bodies overheat because they can't sleep or lay still and are so tense that you can barely bend their arms. They are jittery and sweaty and will claw at their skin in desperation and wind up covered in scratches and skin tears from thrashing about. They have constant diarrhea and their poor little butts break down, causing them even more pain. They can't even eat because they are so frantic from the withdrawals that they can't coordinate suck, swallow, breathe. My heart breaks for these little babies, and it's so hard to not be judgmental and angry with the mothers. It's even more sad thinking that the majority of these babies aren't going to have a great life after they get older either. Story 9. Cancer. A roommate of mine got cancer, and you could smell the stench of death all the way to the porch at the entrance of the house we were renting. He'd already had it when I moved in, and the rent was cheap enough not to raise a stink about it. Intended. A bag of bones and bags of shit were all he had been reduced to. Drank himself to death and absolutely ruined his pancreas over a divorce. One of the things that stood out to me was on Fridays, he liked to get all dressed up and put these red croc-skinned boots on, but he wouldn't get up from bed or anything because he didn't have the strength. He'd just lie there with his boots on, a cowboy to the end. If not for that man, I wouldn't be where I'm at today, literally. He loaned me some cash so that I could drive to Portland from my hometown across the country. That was the last time I saw him. I gave him a hug because I knew it would be the last time. Rest easy, Noe. Story 10. When I was really young, we were crossing a massive bridge. I remember the sudden traffic and my family talking about what it could be about. We finally got to the point on the bridge where we saw what's happening. I'll never ever forget the way the sunbeams went through the clouds, just like a movie. A woman in big black sunglasses, blonde hair, smiling, and on the other side of the bridge. My grandfather said it was an angel, and I truly believed that for a long time. It wasn't until I was showering when I was way older and randomly thought of that time and realized she was going to jump. It's disturbing how happy she was, but probably in so much pain. I remember her stretching her arms out while holding the railing to really extend herself over the edge. She was ready for it. Story 11. Posted elsewhere, but I work in a service shop for cars. We had our security systems team out to rewire cameras and sensors for the auto garage doors you pull up to. While he was up there wiring whatever it was, the power was still onto the door he was working on, and the sensor triggered from something passing through. He was caught in between the rolling garage door and the metal bar it was attached to. Full speed, the door didn't even register that he was in there. The longest 20 minutes of my life was watching an entire shop try to use every possible tool. Floor jack, scissor jack, ladders, bare hands, all while you could only see him from the waist down. He made it, fortunately. The fire department said if we didn't have a scissor jack, he was gone. 3 jaws of life to pry him from that door. Story 12. My brain-dead brother. The morning of, I had had a 4-hour nightmare of laying in bed as I was in terrible pain, and my mind slowly slipped away. I was terrified. When I woke, I knew something was wrong. I was told hours later my brother was brain-dead after a heart attack caused by a cerebral hematoma. I sped home. When I got there, I saw him. His eyes were half open, slack-jawed, and with exposed brain matter. They had opted for surgery on the incredible, unlikely possibility it could help. I nearly fainted. However, the worst bit came after. My mother spent hours reading the Harry Potter books in the hope her son was still lingering somewhere in there. She had read them all to us as we were growing up. That sad, futile act of hope was more distressing to me than seeing what his shell had been reduced to. The exposed brain matter was some kind of plastic they placed over where they removed skull in an attempt to reduce the pressure on the brain. I'm guessing that, when there was no improvement,